How did World War II begin? Welcome to History's Chosen. My name is Sean. The date? August 31st, 1939. The place? The German-Polish border in a German province known as West Upper Silesia. Under the cover of darkness, a group of Nazi operatives dressed in Polish military uniforms seized control of the Gleiwitz radio station. Moments later, an anti-German message is broadcast over the airwaves. This event is recorded in history as the Gleiwitz incident, and it becomes the immediate flashpoint of World War II. But this was not a real attack. It was a false flag operation, a carefully planned and executed deception designed by the Nazis to make it appear as if Poland had attacked German territory. This was just one of many propaganda strategies used by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime to justify what would come next. The very next day, on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Just 2 days later, on September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany in support of Poland. Within days, what began as a regional conflict escalated into a global war, one that the world would come to know as World War II. This video explores the history of this devastating war and, more importantly, the reasons behind it. Today, we will uncover the multiple causes that led to one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, the story of war. After Germany invaded Poland, Britain and France officially declared war, marking the beginning of World War II. What started in Europe quickly spread across continents. Germany, Italy, and Japan, along with several smaller nations, formed the Axis powers. They stood against the Allied powers, led by Britain and later joined by the Soviet Union and the United States. By early 1941, the Axis powers had launched massive military campaigns and expanded their control across continental Europe, North Africa, East Africa. In the mid-1940s, Germany captured France, delivering a major blow to the Allied forces. Meanwhile, Japan formally joined the war and expanded conflict into Asia. On June 22, 1941, Germany made a critical decision. It invaded the Soviet Union. This opened the Eastern Front, the largest land battle theater in history. This move would later prove to be one of Hitler's greatest mistakes. At the same time, Japan, which had been rapidly expanding in the Asia-Pacific region, made another critical mistake, attacking Pearl Harbor. This attack brought the United States into the war, with both the Soviet Union and the United States now involved. The balance of power began to shift. In June 1942, Japan suffered a major defeat at the Battle of Midway. Then, on February 2nd, 1943, Germany faced a crushing defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad. These turning points sparked the beginning of the downfall of the Axis powers. The Allied forces began reclaiming territories, including France and Italy. Japan, too, was pushed back in the Pacific. In Italy, Benito Mussolini was overthrown and killed. In April 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. Soon after, Germany surrendered unconditionally. However, Japan refused to surrender. In response, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, while the Soviet Union invaded Manchuria. With no options left, Japan finally surrendered on September 2nd, 1945. This marked the end of World War II. But why did this war happen? At first glance, it is easy to blame Adolf Hitler, Nazism, and Germany for World War II, and to a large extent, this is true. However, this is not the complete picture. The rise of Nazism and fascism was not accidental. It was the result of a series of events, decisions, and global conditions that made this war almost inevitable. Let us explore these causes one by one. Treaty of Versailles. Although the Gleiwitz incident and the invasion of Poland were immediate triggers, the seeds of World War II were planted nearly 20 years earlier. The date, June 28, 1919. The place, the Palace of Versailles in Paris. World War I had just ended. The victorious nations, Britain, France, Italy, and the United States, gathered to sign a peace treaty with Germany. This treaty was called the Treaty of Versailles. Although it was presented as a peace agreement, its true purpose was to punish Germany and determine its future. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for the war. It had no choice. The treaty imposed harsh conditions on Germany: loss of territory, severe military restrictions, demilitarization of the Rhineland, massive reparations payments, transfer of coal and industrial resources. France demanded particularly harsh terms. Why? Because Germany was its immediate neighbor and a direct threat. France had suffered enormous economic damage during the war. To protect itself, France ensured that the Rhineland became a buffer zone. To rebuild its economy, it demanded money and coal from Germany, including supplies from the Ruhr Valley. The reparations were so massive that Germany struggled to pay them. In fact, Germany completed its final payment only in October 2010, 92 years later. To meet these demands, the German government printed enormous amounts of currency. This led to hyperinflation. Prices skyrocketed. Money lost its value. People's savings were wiped out. In addition, the treaty prohibited Germany from unifying with Austria despite widespread support among Austrians. For the German people, the Treaty of Versailles was not just a punishment, it was a humiliation. It destroyed their economy, their pride, and their national identity. This humiliation led to anger. That anger slowly transformed into extreme nationalism. The Great Depression of 1929, just as Germany was struggling to recover, another disaster struck. In October 1929, the stock market crashed in the United States. This event triggered the Great Depression. Millions lost their jobs. Banks collapsed. Businesses shut down. Nearly 25% of the American workforce became unemployed. Because the global economy was interconnected, this crisis spread worldwide. Germany was heavily dependent on loans from American banks. When the Depression hit, American banks demanded immediate repayment. At the same time, the Dawes Plan loans were recommenced, which supported German industries, were withdrawn. As a result, industries collapsed, production dropped sharply, unemployment soared. By 1933, around 33% of Germans were unemployed. Between 1930 and 1933, the number of unemployed rose from 2 million to 6.1 million. The government tried to solve the problem by increasing spending and offering welfare programs. But this only worsened the crisis. The economic collapse destroyed people's faith in democracy. Rise of fascism and Nazism. So, friends, because of all these problems, Europe began to witness the rise of totalitarian tendencies and dictatorships. People started losing faith in democracy. Gradually, extremist ideas began to look attractive to the masses. Ultra-nationalist, militaristic, and totalitarian ideologies started spreading rapidly across Europe. In Italy, this ideology was called Fascism, and in Germany, it came to be known as Nazism. These ideologies strongly opposed democracy. They ran massive propaganda campaigns against democratic systems and openly talked about uprooting them completely. Now, if we look at Italy, Italians were also unhappy with the Treaty of Versailles. They believed that after World War I, they had been ignored by the major powers like Britain, France, and the United States. During earlier secret negotiations, the Allied powers had promised Italy certain territories. But after the war, those promises were not fulfilled. On top of that, Italy was going through a severe economic crisis. The country was drowning in debt. There was massive unemployment, social unrest, and political instability. Because of this unstable environment, multiple political movements began to emerge. Finally, in 1922, Benito Mussolini came to power and established the world's first fascist dictatorship. Now, let us come to Germany. The negotiations at the Palace of Versailles had created such an environment in Germany that people were ready to accept extreme ideologies. The humiliation, the economic collapse, and the national anger created a fertile ground for radical leadership. As soon as Adolf Hitler began delivering his fiery speeches, the German public, already angry because of Versailles, started seeing him as a savior. At the same time, during the Great Depression, the flawed economic policies of the Weimar Republic made things worse. Because of this, people completely lost faith in democracy and the existing government. Hitler took advantage of the situation. He combined fascist ideas with racism and started promoting Nazism. He built a strong personality cult around himself. Through powerful speeches and propaganda, he gained massive public support. First, he became the Chancellor of Germany. Then, he systematically destroyed democracy and declared himself the Führer. He promised the people that he would reject the Treaty of Versailles. He promised to restore Germany's wealth, prosperity, and lost glory. He also promoted the idea that Germans were a superior race. Based on this belief, he pushed the idea of territorial expansion, also known as a living space. This expansionist mindset eventually led to invasions of countries like Czechoslovakia and Poland. Now, if we shift our focus to Japan, we see a similar pattern. Japan was also dissatisfied with the Versailles Conference. Although Japan participated in it, its demands were not accepted. In addition, the Great Depression severely affected Japan's economy. This economic crisis created conditions where radical elements began to grow. These radical groups gained influence within the Japanese military. They started promoting the idea of expanding Japanese control over Asia and then gradually expanded into other parts of China. Failure of the League of Nations. Now let us talk about the next major reason behind World War II, the failure of the League of Nations. The League of Nations was established in 1919 and is considered the predecessor of the United Nations. Its main goal was to maintain global peace and establish the rule of law in international relations. There was hope that this organization would prevent future wars. However, in reality, it failed. One of the biggest reasons for its failure was that many important countries either did not join it or did not actively participate. This weakened its global authority. Another major issue was that the League did not have any military power. Unlike modern peacekeeping forces, it had no way to enforce its decisions. Because of this, it was not prepared to take action against aggressive nations like Nazi Germany. For example, in 1936, when Hitler began remilitarizing the Rhineland, the League did nothing. This was a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Similarly, when Italy invaded Ethiopia, the League failed to respond effectively. When Japan invaded Manchuria, again, the League remained inactive. These repeated failures sent a strong message to aggressive countries. It showed them that they could expand their territories without facing serious consequences. Instead of stopping aggression, the League's inaction actually boosted the confidence of these nations. As a result, preventing World War II became increasingly difficult and eventually almost impossible. Possibilities of appeasement. Apart from this, another major reason why World War II could not be prevented was the policy of appeasement adopted by the Allied powers. Hitler openly started rejecting the Treaty of Versailles. He began rebuilding Germany's military strength. However, Britain and France chose not to take immediate action against him. Why? Because they wanted to use Hitler as a counterforce against Soviet-led communism. Due to their narrow strategic interests, the Allied powers failed to unite. And this turned out to be one of the biggest tragedies in history. If these countries had taken strong countermeasures at an early stage, Hitler might never have become so powerful. And perhaps World War II could have been avoided. A classic example of appeasement is the Munich Agreement of 1938. Under this agreement, Britain and France allowed Germany to take control of the German-dominated regions of Czechoslovakia. In return, Germany promised that it would not expand further. But this promise did not last. In March 1939, Nazi Germany broke the agreement and captured the rest of Czechoslovakia. Even after this clear violation, Britain and France still did not take any strong action. This policy of appeasement was not limited to Britain and France. Even the Soviet Union, which was ideologically opposed to Hitler, followed a similar approach. Soviet-Nazi pact just 1 week before the invasion of Poland, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This pact further boosted Hitler's confidence. Officially, it was a non-aggression agreement, but later, during the Nuremberg trials, it was revealed that the pact had several secret protocols. These secret agreements played a crucial role in shaping the events that followed. They became the basis for Germany's invasion of Poland. And soon after, on September 17th, the Soviet Union also invaded Poland. Although ideologically Nazis and the Soviet Union were completely opposed to each other, geopolitical interests brought them together. Both sides had mutual distrust of Britain and its allies. Through the secret protocols, they divided Eastern Europe into their respective spheres of influence. At the same time, the Soviet Union failed to form any collective security agreement with Britain and France. It also felt threatened by Hitler's expansionist policies. Therefore, in 1939, the Soviet Union changed its strategy and temporarily aligned itself with Nazi Germany. As a result, Poland was divided between the two powers. Western Poland came under German control. Eastern Poland came under Soviet control. Even after this, for almost 2 years, the Soviet Union stayed out of the war. It did not take any action against Hitler's expansion. Instead, it focused on securing its own territories. It invaded Finland and other parts of Eastern Europe. However, eventually, it too became a victim of Hitler's aggression. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched an invasion of the Soviet Union, opening the Eastern Front. This marked the Soviet Union's formal entry into the war. This decision turned out to be one of Hitler's biggest mistakes. If Britain, France, and the Soviet Union had united earlier and stopped appeasement, the war might have been prevented.